Okay, if we start.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Chapter 9. Activating the astral body. If the organic biological machine and its moving centrum manifestations can be made passive, higher substances can be driven upward by the resulting negative force, and the astral body can be automatically activated. How's that for a come on? Okay, Ishant, would you like to go forward? First paragraph there, and go as long as you like.
Okay. Of what use is incense and all the other apparatus to produce the necessary atmosphere for invocation if we have no will over the atmosphere?
You muted yourself. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, 1 second. Of what use is incense and all other apparatus to produce the necessary atmosphere for invocation if we have no will over the atmosphere produced by our machine's states? A man who has real being is able to control his atmosphere. In ancient times, men who were real priests, not like our contemporary priests, were even able to cure diseases just with this atmosphere. It is the atmosphere which allows a priest to invoke and collect the negative force which can serve as an offering of energies to be used for the invocation of presences from higher dimensions, both celestial and fallen. Okay, pass.
Okay, I'm going to insert an idea here for us to ponder while we're reading this chapter. How do we see the newly acquired capacity of Suno and AI as potentially one of these atmospheres? Michelle, start on the last paragraph on the first page there, exercises.
Exercises given for the awakening of the machine are only partially possible when we first begin, because in order to activate the exercises, special substances are necessary. These substances must be borrowed until the awakening of the machine and the accompanying transformation is completed. Such substances are collected in great quantity by invocants who are called teachers and given at real need, transmitted by the force of will, but completely subject to the actual work necessity of the recipient.
Give it to me again. I had to fiddle with some dials here.
The last sentence or the whole thing?
The whole paragraph, if you don't mind. And
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
could get your volume up a little bit, I'm having
Okay.
trouble.
No, it's at the maximum.
Okay.
Okay. Exercises given for the awakening of the machine are only partially possible when we first begin, because in order to activate the exercises, special substances are necessary. These substances must be borrowed until the awakening of the machine and the accompanying transformations is completed. Such substances are collected in great quantity by invocants who are called teachers and given at real need, transmitted by the force of will, but completely subject to the actual work necessity of the recipient.
Thank you. Sandy.
The passive force, even in the form of negative emotion or non-activity, can be used as food for any new level of evolution. However, in the ordinary state of a human being, the astral body continues as a passive source of negative force, and all these special alchemical substances produced by the organic biological chemical factory are pushed downward and go to feed the unconscious parasite within the machine. That's something which in schools in ancient times was called the moon. But if the organic biological machine and its moving centrum manifestations can be made passive, higher substances are driven upward by the resulting negative force, producing an active astral body. And up.
Okay, I'm going to have you read all of that again. I don't think very quick and I didn't catch it. And also I wanted Jayesh to kind of get in our picture here.
Sure.
Thank you.
The passive force, even in the form of negative emotion or non-activity, can be used as food for any new level of evolution. However, in the ordinary state of a human being, the astral body continues as a passive source of negative force. And all these special alchemical substances produced by the organic biological chemical factory are pushed downward and go to feed the unconscious parasite within the machine. That's something which in schools in ancient times was called the moon. But if the organic biological machine and its moving centrum manifestations can be made passive, higher substances are driven upward by the resulting negative force, producing an active astral body.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Jayesh. Oops.
Hold on.
Okay, a
Okay,
little bit loud, little bit louder.
uh, can you hear me?
Okay,
Now?
barely.
Hello.
Okay, that's better.
Okay. What is the page number? I'm struggling with the moon.
78. 78. And it's like the third or fourth paragraph down, if one is able.
Yeah. If one is able to send higher substances upward toward the astral body by the voluntary activation of centrums and parts of centrums through the technique of bringing them to life, by bringing the whole machine to life, then later it will be possible to eventually direct prayer absolute, which is an even higher cosmic substance, upward into the higher spheres. Organic man is ordinarily only a mechanical apparatus for the downward transformation of substances descending to our cosmos from much higher cosmoses. This mechanical transformation occurs naturally just by allowing the lower organic centrums to remain involuntary, which is the inevitable automatic result of placing one's centrum of gravity, mental, emotional, and reflexive fixations outside oneself in people, objects, and external influences, whether real or imaginary. Pass.
All right. Top of page 79. One can transform the biological machine into an apparatus for the transformation of the being by awakening the machine and bringing the work of the lower centrums into the voluntary. By reversing this cosmic apparatus for transmuting substances, we can become objectively useful in certain work, and our presence will sooner or later assume a corresponding being in direct proportion to our work obligation, should we continue faithfully each day. Even though the absolute cannot be aware of our individuality, we can make ourselves known to higher forces who can use us for work purposes. To choose our masters wisely is most essential. And I pass to Nishant.
What are the substances produced by the chemical factory of the biological machine, which would be available for our work if they were not wasted by our failure to use our negativity to feed our self-invocation? Could we use these substances formed by the results of our work on ourselves for the formation of a soul? What they are exactly is not important just now. Not to waste them is what is important in our beginning work. One small thing we can do is stop all unnecessary, involuntary manifestations of the moving centrum.
Sandy?
Try this little exercise. relax all the muscles motivated by the moving centrum, except those muscles actually necessary now. And at the same time, activate your interior attention, which is to say, that attention which you place from time to time upon the interior workings of the biological machine. Then bring the moving centrum as much as possible into the voluntary, so that it can act as the source of negative force for this exercise. I'll pass.
Nishant.
Oh, it would be me.
It would be you. I'm so sorry, Jayesh. I'm sorry.
When performing manual labor to gain the will to awaken the machine, we should use only those muscles actually necessary to do the job. We must learn to relax other muscles. I know, so many muscles. Sorry, let me give this again.
Sure.
We must learn to relax other muscles, particularly the head brain. Fidgeting, especially mentally, is something we should eradicate from our behavior. When the moving centrum is in the involuntary mode, it becomes subject to all the laws of reflex, and because the astral body is forced to become passive, it cannot form itself. To bring the astral body to life, we must, before anything else, make the organic body our passive force. Of course, we can expect resistance from the organic body. After all, hasn't it always been the active part of ourselves? Us.
Okay. Are you tracking this, Sandy? Do I go next or does Nisha? I go next. Okay. Over the involuntary reflexive parts of our machines, we do not and cannot have any authority, nor would we wish to. Dolphins are forced to intentionally take every breath or they die. For this reason, they are forced to sleep only a few moments at a time. We would not wish to live like this and can be thankful that the reflexive centrum maintains all automatic functions without necessitating or continual supervision. At the same time, the involuntary reflexive part of ourselves is like a wild animal in us, a continual source of negative emotion, without which, at least as we begin life in this world, we would feel no motivation whatever to do anything, even for our simple survival. Pass to Nishant.
All human motivation for work of any kind is produced by negative emotion, especially what we think of as our most creative and artistic impulses. Without negative emotion, the machine would simply come to a complete halt until it died of sheer inactivity. The worst form of negative manifestation is in the mental. Human beings are enamored with their own thoughts and with the compulsive expression of those thoughts, which by one accident or another they have identified with their imaginary personality. Subjective art, by which I mean the attempt at self-expression of the imaginary emotional self, is another such maleficent manifestation of the negative force, and is destructive to the formation of the soul. Okay. Pause.
Is that a new idea?
Yeah, it's a subjective art is destructive to the formation of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. So I guess you could contrast that with objective art.
Yeah, but how?
Yeah.
I mean, it will take long time.
He kind of describes it more in more detail, saying that, by which I mean the attempt at self-expression of the imaginary emotional self. So what exactly that is?
It's pretty specific. If we have a grasp of what it is, it's saying that's what subjective art is. It is that specific thing, not necessarily art or being an artist or doing art. It's saying subjective art, which is self-expression, an attempt of self-expression of the imaginary emotional self. So
Yeah, I mean, all these songwriters that's singing all these sad songs and love songs and what is called what is this? Like encouragement song. What are those called? Motivational songs. So that is just all negative. What is subjective? Self-expression of imaginary emotional self.
I would say probably. I mean, I'm not an expert in the distinction here because I do not perceive sufficiently finely of the distinction. I have an idea of what it's referencing, but I don't feel like I'm tuned sufficiently to be able to make a judgment about something. But I think it is the next paragraph hopefully will solve this dilemma for us, which is, how to proceed. What do you work with? If you don't have a grasp of what your imaginary emotional self is in relation to, your higher self or your true self or whatever. So I think there's some clues in the next couple of paragraphs.
Yeah.
It should be sufficient just to indicate the rough centrum of gravity of the idea of producing alchemical substances in the machine. It is then up to us to dig deeper, to discover for ourselves exactly how to apply this idea in a practical way to our personal work. I'm going to just do that again.
Mm-hmm.
It should be sufficient just to indicate the rough centrum of gravity of the idea of producing alchemical substances in the machine. It is then up to us to dig deeper, to discover for ourselves exactly how to apply this idea in a practical way to our personal work. The whole exact science of extracting substances and transforming them into higher substances, which can fuel our invocations of the Absolute, is available whenever we find ourselves in a position to really work. By which I mean not as we first arrive in financial, mental, emotional, and philosophical distress, but able to help ourselves and at the same time help the teacher in his work. I'll pass.
That's a good clue, don't you think? Because in order to really be something that is considered to be of service or in the way of service, you know, there's so much baggage you have to leave at the door before you're actually really even useful. So that's a clue. That's a requirement there. That's how I'm understanding it.
Pretty much clue.
Huh?
Can you hear me?
No, say again.
Can you hear me?
Now I can. Say it
No?
again.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We hear you. Maybe he doesn't hear us, I'm thinking.
I
Can
cannot
you
hear
hear?
you. Wait.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah.
Good.
Yeah, that's that I was saying. What I was saying.
Okay.
What I was saying is it's a clue for the frustration to be in the
Sure.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I'll start with there are
sure. There are.
ways to producing great amounts of substance, but we must use forces in quite a different way. And we must be willing to give up our ordinary organic manifestations and ideas completely, at least for a certain time, under definite direction. It could take many years to accomplish this. We must somehow buy time for our work. In order to buy sufficient time for our work toward the work, we must use all our resources for the rapid accumulation of substances in ways which would be impossible for ordinary man with his superstitions and tribal taboos. And this aim must, moreover, be accomplished not just casually as we would wander through a market, but with the full force of our whole being. Pass.
For instance, it would not be lawful to borrow money to enable us to work on ourselves, and yet our work will require as many hours of preparation as would be needed to prepare ourselves as physicians. And like medical students, we must somehow, in our copious spare time, earn a sufficient income necessary to maintain our organic existence for perhaps a decade or two, during which almost the whole of our attention cannot be spared for our livelihood, because it is almost 100% concentrated on one work aim. We should be advised that it will be necessary for us to embark on a form of work which will make it impossible for at least several years to provide for ourselves an outside source of livelihood, because the fullest possible attention is necessary during this period. We must therefore find a way to subsidize this work in advance. And I'll pass to Michelle. We're on page 82, starting at the bottom paragraph, this period.
Thank you. This period cannot be passed through more quickly. It is possible that one individual out of a million might just be the first person to find a way to split their force into two parts and still be able to produce the necessary transformation. But who wishes to take the gamble when the way is already known and the outcome much more certain? We should allow 2 to 3 years just to gather substances for work, during which we may not be able to earn our livelihood. We can collect ordinary information in ordinary life, and it would be harmful to stop everything all at once. But still, it requires a great many hours each day to accomplish our alchemical work.
Now it's Jayesh, right?
Nishant, I think.
Oh, Nishant. Okay.
Yeah.
You guys figure it out.
In the meantime, before we begin the alchemical work cycle, we must find a rapid and effortless way to earn a livelihood in advance, to sustain ourselves for the duration. In this work, we must become very resourceful. We are expected somehow to build up a bank account and then drop our ordinary survival efforts while we work to develop higher bodies, which will be formed around the lower centrums. And for real work, we will require 7 higher bodies. Bodies which can be viewed as souls in relation to lower bodies. Of course, even the organic human body is a soul in relation to that of a dog. We will have to develop the resourcefulness to maintain ourselves and our work. And in the process, our work to prepare ourselves for the work must not suffer or take second place. In the work, we cannot earn our livelihood in ordinary ways. If we are not willing to risk everything now for the sake of the work, why should the teacher risk his own work to help us prepare for the work? That is, if we do not, several weeks from now, lose interest entirely. Pass.
One may be quite willing to lose everything in Monte Carlo, but not for the work. In the casino, we can understand beforehand what is at stake and what we may win. But in the work, we do not really know what we may lose and what we may win. In the beginning, perhaps, we cannot understand. But maybe we can somehow smell or taste what may come of all this. For some, it is possible to retrieve the results of their own past efforts. But to gamble with counterfeit currency could cost us our life. Some pay with voluntary emotional, some with physical, some mental. Some pay with all three types of currency. It is up to us to find out how to pay. No, pass. JS.
Yeah, thank you. First, we should develop just one higher body. Then we'll talk seriously about developing additional higher bodies. Americans always want to start as the president. But a president, in order to be a good executive, must understand the subjective and objective needs of the workers as human beings. And at the same time, balance this with the objective needs of the organization. This balance game makes the president's work almost impossible. Of course, these desire to begin at the top and work our own. Let me give this again. Of course, this desire to begin at the top and work our way down is a natural result of the conditioning given to us by our parents, who never raised us to be servants in the first place. Pass.
Before we go on, I just wonder if anybody is noticing the irony of the language in this paragraph. I mean, given our current external world situation, somebody using the term "but a president" as in the description in this paragraph there, you know, Americans always want to start as a president, but a president, in order to be a good executive, must understand the needs of the workers and balance this with the needs of the organization and the balanced game. That's that theme of how to apply. What would that be? That would be stress. It would be observation. It would be direction. I mean, it would encompass all of the, quote, potential for what could be done. And then it says the balance game makes the president's work almost impossible. I mean, not even talking about the content of this book, just talking about the situation in the world outside. That's a description of something that doesn't usually get stated in this manner. It's a balance game, and it's not in balance at the moment. It's kind of, yeah, interesting. Do you guys know the reference of your parents never raised you to be servants in the first place? Do you have that cultural context? Yeah, I didn't think so. So there is a tradition in lots of families, never mind what, you know, level of society that you're in, is to make sure that your children can but stand on their own and don't have to either rely on their parents or be the servant to someone else in order to get by. That's a traditional thing. I got it from my grandmother, and, you know, I'm sure other people have had it from various elements in their family, but it's kind of this idea that you want to be able to stand on your own 2 feet and not have somebody else in charge. And that's the reference here in terms of the larger self.
That's a worst conditioning, right?
That's right. It's a form of conditioning, which there are cultures in which you raise your children so that they will be content to be servants, that they will wish to be servants, because 1, then they'll be looked after, and 2, they won't have to subject themselves to the conditions of decision making about everything. They will do what their employer tells them to do. Yeah. There are cultures that still do that. Teach their kids to be subservient as a way to get by. Yeah. Okay, where are we? Michelle.
I think it's you next, though, but
Who?
Patricia and then Michelle. That's how it kind of ended up.
Okay, good. This can be forgiven because they knew what it was like, what it was to be an involuntary slave, and they did not like it. For them to be a servant never led to being a master. And if you tried to explain it to them now, they would reluctantly have you put away somewhere nice and quiet until you came to your senses and saw life as they comprehend it. To become a master, we must understand the function of the carriage and its mechanical needs and know the horse from the inside out. Also, we must understand the driver and his needs. We must strive to study and understand our lower nature in the smallest detail before we can even consider its mastery. You guys get the image there, what they're talking about with the carriage and the mechanical needs and the horse and the driver?
Gurdjieff.
Say again?
Gurdjieff. That's how Gurdjieff came up with it, right? The idea, right? No?
Yes, that's the reference. Yeah. Yeah. This was written in 91.
Gurdjieff's idea is eternal, isn't it?
That's a little earlier. A little bit. Michelle.
One can be a good general only if one has experienced subjectively and completely the life of a private. To understand a soldier, one must suffer as a soldier. One must know completely the potential heroism and the suffering, both subjective and objective, of everyone under one's command. The study of our lower nature could easily require many thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years, and yet life is so short. How can we manage to overcome this little quandary? Fortunately, we happen to have hundreds of thousands of years and even trillions of years to study the machine and its life in the smallest detail, thanks to the magic of recurrence and eternal return.
It should be clear why organic existence is a necessary prelude to the conscious formation of higher bodies. Of course, if human beings were naturally formed 3-brain beings and not 2-brain lower animals who happen to be the result of genetic tempering, many thousands of years ago by visitors to their planet. You could start with the astral body, which is the real first body of man. If you were born with a fully formed astral body, and if everything had gone right in the first place, you would have been, then the machine would naturally be awake all the time, and none of these annoying preliminaries would be necessary.
On the other hand, without the genetic tampering, no human beings would have had the opportunity for evolution in any way, shape, or form. And so they have at least something, disregarding the fact that it was entirely accidental and unforeseen, to be thankful for. And I'll pass.
It's JS, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. A human being, as ordinarily found in his natural habitat, that is to say, the organic biological world, could be said to operate something like a pump, much like the kind of pump which forces liquids and gases through pipes or pushes and pulls them upward against the force of gravity, except that a human being operates as a pump, which happens for a reason best known to the mathematician whose higher mental equation is manifested as this world of ours to be necessary for the passage of higher, finer matter into the organic world as it descends from the solar absolute. I will pass.
Okay, and your assignment for this week is to take that paragraph, which is one full bloody sentence, and see how it relates to the previous 7 pages, is it, that we've read of this chapter? Because the title of the chapter is called Activating the Astral Body. And we haven't heard that topic even touched on yet. So somehow all of this is preliminary. And yes, your assignment is write a damn paper and make sure that you understand what you're reading. And I haven't a clue how to tell you how to do that. But I recalled that EJ used to have us sit for a while after we had our reading sessions and not talk about them, just sit with them. And that practice, maybe read this aloud to yourself sometime during the next 2 weeks, or go online and watch the YouTube of it, because it'll have, you know, this tape of this session. And then see where you're at with, you know, grasping some of it. Because there's no way, in my opinion, that I can go from paragraph to paragraph of this as we read it and get it. I'm lucky if I get, you know, 1 or 2 phrases in a paragraph or a sentence. But so I'm really glad we have next 5 minutes silence and sitting with a parked body. Yes, thank you. I'm really happy we have this time every 2 weeks. And I would like to suggest that we might want to read this section again next time. And that's what I'll put in our notice. And if you know of anybody who couldn't make it today, that's what you can let them know, is they won't have missed anything. We're going to do it again.
Yeah, I was going to ask about, like, okay, I mean, this kind of work may require not just one lifetime, but multiple lifetimes. And there is a paragraph for it itself. So yeah, all your questions are always answered in the next paragraph.
Yeah. Yeah, it works very nicely. So I'll be sitting in silence for 5 minutes, and anyone who wishes to join me, you're welcome to be here too. Thank you. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Good night,
Thank
all.
you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.